Today's video is sponsored by Hunter Killer, the ultimate murder mystery subscription box for fans of true crime. We've all been spending a lot of time at home recently, and there's only so long you can spend glued to the TV or your phone before the screen starts feeling like a prison. You might have tried everything to break the monotony. If you're looking for an actual fun way to spend an evening at home, unplugged from all your devices, then Hunter Killer is the perfect game to mix things up. The aim of the game is simple: to solve a homicide investigation. Each box that comes conveniently delivered to your door is part of a larger, ongoing case, and they're all filled to the brim with high quality and detailed documents, evidence, audio recordings, case files and ciphers, which you'll use to eliminate suspects and progress through the narrative. It's like being part of a Sherlock Holmes story you can actually feel and touch. You can play it by yourself, with your very own Watson by your side, or, like I do, with friends and family. I found it to be a great way to stay social, since there's nothing my circle of friends and I love more than playing detective. And let's face it, these days it's a way cheaper and safer alternative to a night on the town. So, with Halloween just around the corner, now's the perfect time to give it a whirl. Head over to hunterkiller.com/lazy masquerade and use promo code LAZY to get 20% off your first box. Again, take advantage of that spine-chilling 20% discount by going to hunterkiller.com/lazy masquerade and using promo code LAZY, and find out if you have what it takes to crack the cold case waiting for you inside. Some of you might already be aware of the Johnny Gosh mystery, but for those of you who haven't ventured down this particular rabbit hole yet, I can assure you that it's full of twists and turns, and it's one you're likely to get lost down. 38 years ago, on the morning of September 5th, 1982, Johnny Gosh, a 12-year-old from Iowa, left his house before dawn to start his paper route. He was delivering papers to the good people of West Des Moines. Johnny usually woke up his father to join him, but that particular Sunday morning, he instead snuck off without him and brought the family's miniature dachshund, Gretchen, a company. He was seen by other paper carriers picking up his newspapers that morning. At some point between 6 and 7 AM, while delivering those papers, Johnny disappeared without a trace and has never been seen or heard from again. Or has he? Let's go over the details. Just before he went missing, 2 local residents reported seeing Johnny talking with an unknown man in a blue Ford Fairmont with Nebraska plates, though they hadn't committed that number plate to memory. There appeared to be another man in the passenger seat. Neither of them could hear what Johnny was talking about with this man. It appeared as if the man in the car had stopped Johnny to ask for directions, though the witnesses can't be sure since they were only watching from their bedroom windows. Either way, they both said that something didn't feel right about the interaction, and that Johnny seemed to get spooked. One of these neighbours said that afterwards, as Johnny cycled off back towards his home, the car began following him. The other neighbour who witnessed this underwent hypnosis in an effort to remember the license plate number, though sadly, he never was able to remember it. "I keep hoping I'll wake up in the middle of the night and see that number on the license plate as distinctly as night and day," said the neighbour. But that hasn't happened. Realising that Johnny had gone off by himself, and that a local resident had called complaining about their morning paper not being delivered, Mr Gosh, Johnny's father, immediately went out searching for him along his usual route. It was then that he found Johnny's wagon full of newspapers, abandoned 2 blocks away from their family home. Gretchen, the family dog, was also found alone on a different street. There was no sign of Johnny anywhere. Fearing the worst, his father contacted the police immediately and reported his son missing. Unfortunately, the authorities were slow to react. Procedure at the time was that Johnny had to be gone for at least 72 hours before he could be classified as a missing person, a frustrating policy that, thankfully, is no longer in place today. To begin with, the cops assumed Johnny was simply a runaway. That didn't make any sense to anyone that knew the kid. By all accounts, he had a happy home life and was a level-headed young man who showed absolutely no signs of wanting to run off by himself. Soon, the investigators came around to the idea that someone had taken him. 2 months passed with no sign of Johnny. Then, suddenly, there was a report in Oklahoma of a young boy screaming to a woman, "I'm Johnny Gosh! Help me!" This young boy was then dragged away by 2 unknown men. Noreen, Johnny's mother, believes that based on the boy's description, this was indeed her son. In the years that followed, little other evidence was ever collected by the detectives, and there were no other leads of any kind. It was like poor Johnny had just faded away. His parents took matters into their own hands, and hired several private investigators to turn up whatever they could. They were even able to get their son's face plastered on milk cartons across the USA. Ultimately, this turned up no new information. 2 years later, another kid from that same neighborhood also went missing under suspicious circumstances, leading many people to draw a connection between the two cases. So far this sounds like a pretty standard missing persons case, right? But here's where things take a strange and interesting turn, and where the rabbit hole becomes that little bit deeper. According to Johnny's mother, Nadine, almost 15 years after her son's disappearance, in March 1997, at around 2:30 AM, she was awoken by a loud knock on her front door. Startled as one would be, she looked through the peephole to see who was waiting outside. She saw 2 blurry figures. One of them spoke.
"Mum, it's me, Johnny. Can I come in?"
Nadine couldn't believe her ears, and as they adjusted, she couldn't believe her eyes either. It was Johnny standing outside, now no longer a boy, but a 27-year-old man. She said there was no mistaking that it was him, and when she opened the door, he revealed a unique birthmark on his chest, proving his identity. Apparently, he was accompanied by another, unidentified man. "We talked for about an hour or an hour and a half," said Nadine. "He was with another man, but I have no idea who the person was." Johnny would look over to the other person for approval to speak. He didn't say where he was living or where he was going. That night, Johnny asked his mother for help and told her that he had indeed been trafficked when he was younger, and that he had now escaped and was in hiding, that his life was still in danger and that he couldn't stay. Johnny and the unidentified man left just before sunrise, and Nadine never heard from her son again after that. Question is, did this visit genuinely happen, or did a grieving Nadine simply imagine the entire encounter? Could it have been some kind of sick, well-researched prank? That all remains unclear. In 2000, Nadine published a book that detailed her supposed encounter with her son, titled Why Johnny Can't Come Home. Then, in 2006, she reported that a set of photographs had been left on her doorstep. She notified the authorities and posted some of the pictures on her website. One photo shows 3 young lads, bound and gagged. Another shows what appears to be a young Johnny, again gagged and tied up, with a branding on his shoulder. Who had sent these pictures? 12 days after they arrived on her doorstep, the Des Moines police station received this anonymous letter. "Gentlemen, someone has played a reprehensible joke on a grieving mother. The photo in question is not one of her son, but of 3 boys in Tampa, Florida, about 1979-1980, challenging each other to an escape contest. There was an investigation concerning that picture made by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. No charges were filed, and no wrongdoing was established. The lead detective on the case was named Zalva. This allegation should be easy enough to check out." Nelson Zalva was indeed a real officer, and said that whoever had written the letter was telling the truth, that the first photo was of some kids just playing a game. He had seen it and investigated it before. However, that other photo, the one showing what appeared to be Johnny, was new. He'd never seen it before. No one has ever conclusively identified who the boy in the photo is, and whether or not he was just playing a game too. Nadine believes wholeheartedly that it's Johnny. More photos would arrive on her doorstep over the years, some of them being confirmed hoaxes. Stills from horror movies, and fakes made by sick losers tormenting a bereaved mother. Some of them, though, remain unidentified. Nadine's posted most of them online, in hopes that someone might come forward with information about them, in hopes that they'll somehow lead her to the truth. Theories about what happened to Johnny are numerous and varied, ranging from him being taken by a ring of high-profile predators to be sold, to him simply being murdered by an opportunist, to a whole load of other possibilities. Honestly, this rabbit hole is deeper than the Mariana Trench, so it's no wonder there are so many opinions about it. There are loads of documentaries and podcasts about Johnny's vanishing online, so I'd recommend checking those out for a more detailed analysis of the case. Ultimately, despite Noreen's belief that her son visited her all those years after disappearing, nobody really knows whether Johnny's alive or dead. Well, somebody knows, I suppose. Let's be honest, we've all got a few skeletons in our closet. Some of us, literally. This little mystery is absolutely bizarre and has a bunch of unanswered questions attached to it. Let's take a look at the body in the drag queen's closet. Dorian Corey was a relatively well-known trans woman, drag queen, and fashion designer living in Harlem. She'd regularly appeared in high-profile shows in the city and even featured in the documentary Paris is Burning. Unfortunately for her, she never had much money to speak of. In 1993, Dorian passed away at the age of 56. It's not the circumstances of her death that are suspicious though. 2 months after she passed, Dorian's friend and caretaker, Lois Taylor, and 2 of her pals were going through Dorian's closet in search of Halloween costumes. Dorian had given them permission to do so before she died. What they found inside was unexpected to say the least. After rifling through feathers, fabrics and sequins, they noticed a large, green plaid garment bag on the floor that was far too heavy for any of them to lift. Unable to find the zipper, Lois cut it open with a pair of scissors, hoping to find some exciting Halloween props to use inside. Instead, she and her friends found something else. The partially mummified corpse of a man curled up in the fetal position with a bullet hole in his head. A putrid stench escaped the bag and filled the room, and Lois immediately called the authorities. An investigation was quickly underway. The body itself had been wrapped in fake leather and plastic bags. After unwrapping it, several pull tabs from old 1960s flip-top beer cans fell out. The victim's once brown skin had turned yellow and purple. Their ears were reduced to mere cartilage, and they had obviously been dead for a long time. So, naturally, the detectives on the case were faced with several questions. Whose body was this? How long had they been deceased? How did they end up in Dorian's closet? Was she keeping it there? If so, why? Using a chemical solution to harden the body's brittle fingers, the coroners were able to retrieve a set of fingerprints. They now knew who the mouldy remains belonged to. The cadaver was Robert Bobby Worley, a former criminal with an extensive record. He hadn't been seen or heard from since the mid to late 60s. That, along with the pull tabs, led them to conclude that Bobby had been dead for the past 20 years. Still, that didn't explain why he was in Dorian's house. Had he been inside her closet for the whole 20 years? Was the drag queen actually a murderer? That didn't seem likely. Dorian was a calm, thoughtful and peaceful person. So, let's dive into this diva's rabbit hole and explore a few of the leading theories on the hows and whys. Theory number 1. Dorian and Bobby had a turbulent relationship that took a dark turn. Though Bobby was a very secretive person, he did allegedly open up to his brother about being in a relationship with a woman named Dorian, who he often fought with, sometimes physically. Bobby was a very aggressive person, so if the pair really were in a relationship, perhaps Dorian killed him in order to protect herself, or maybe even to get revenge. Theory number 2. This has never been confirmed by authorities, but supposedly a note was found pinned to Bobby's remains that simply read, "This poor man broke into my home and was trying to rob me." It was written in Dorian's handwriting. Like I said, Bobby had an extensive record. Perhaps he had broken into Dorian's home and she acted in self-defense. Finally, theory number 3. Dorian was covering up for the real murderer, hiding Bobby's body in her apartment to protect whoever had taken his life. Dorian had moved apartments in 1988, and it seems unlikely that she would have lugged a dead body to her new home. It's more likely that the body was already there in the apartment when she moved in. She may have moved to that new place specifically to help protect the previous occupant and safeguard their secret. Thing is, all of those theories fail to explain one important thing. Why didn't she get rid of the remains over the course of 20 years? Panic. According to Detective Figueroa, who worked the case, People just wrap up a body in whatever's available. It's just spontaneous. You wrap it up. Then you put it in a suitcase. Then you put it in the closet. Then you just look at it periodically and wish that it would go away. On top of that, she lived in a bustling part of New York City, not exactly the easiest place to dispose of a body. After killing him, Dorian likely routinely covered Bobby in baking soda to suppress any odours. But then again, if she was innocent of any wrongdoing, why didn't she just come clean to the cops after killing him? Well, Dorian was a black trans woman living in a poor neighbourhood. Given this incident had likely happened in the 60s, she probably feared that nobody would have any sympathy for her, even if she had acted in self-defense. Ultimately, we don't know which of these theories is correct, and because this isn't exactly a well-known case, no matter how far we dig into this rabbit hole, we'll probably never get a definitive answer. There's nothing like a good spook at night time, and almost all of us have childhood memories of sitting around a campfire with our friends, telling scary stories. There's a strange shared pleasure in group fear. Still, for all of the tales we heard about killers with hooks for hands watching us from the dark tree line beyond the fire pit, none of us ever really believed they were true, or that we were ever in any real danger. Well, had we heard about this next case, we all might have felt a little less secure around those campfires growing up. This is Tulsa's most infamous cold case, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. It was 1977, and camp season had just started in Oklahoma. Camp Scott was one of the finest Girl Scout camps in the state, and was celebrating its 50th anniversary. Based 50 kilometers outside of Tulsa, it boasted 410 acres of land, with its very own creek, and clusters of platform tents spread out among the trees. A little slice of heaven on earth for any nature-loving kid. In preparation for the big camp-out of the season, the counselors and counselors in training held a training session by themselves to ensure everyone knew what they were doing, and that all of the young scouts would be totally safe during the week-long break. During this training exercise, one counselor brought along a box of donuts to share out during the evening, which she left with her personal belongings. After returning from the day's activities, she found that the box had been opened, and that all of the donuts were gone. In their place was a sinister note which said that 3 campers were going to be murdered. She took that sinister note to her supervisors, and they all brushed it off. Clearly this was just some tasteless prank, nothing to be concerned about, right? It was Sunday, June 12th, and the first buses full of Girl Scouts arrived at Camp Scott. School had just been let out for summer, so spirits were obviously high. The weather didn't match the youngsters' vibes though, what with it being a misty and rainy day. All of the scouts were split into age-appropriate groups and sent to their designated tents, each of which held about 4 to 6 campers. The rest of the evening was filled with a whole host of fun activities, ranging from archery, to swimming, to making s'mores around a campfire, and, of course, telling a few ghost stories while doing so. But the festivities of that first night were short-lived, as the weather took a turn for the worse, and a sudden thunderstorm forced everyone to run back to their tents. There, they would be safe from the elements, but not from the unknown person who had been watching them the whole day. The Kiowa unit of tents was arranged in a horseshoe pattern, with a campfire and common area in the center. What made the Kiowa unit a little different was that it had an extra tent, tent number 8, which was situated a little further back from all the other tents, much closer to the trees. That, paired with the heavy rain and complete darkness, made it difficult for the Kiowa unit's counselor to see into tent number 8. 6 a.m. on the 13th, and one of the counselors woke up early to go and shower. As she cut through the trail that led to the bathhouse, she made a gruesome and heartbreaking discovery. 3 sleeping bags were lying in the middle of the trail, piled on top of one another. Bewildered, she unzipped the top bag. After doing so, she ran back to the camp and told the other counselors what she had just found. The 3 sleeping bags contained the bodies of Lori Lee Farmer, Michelle Heather Goose, and Doris Denise Miller, 8, 9, and 10, respectively. All 3 had been beaten to death with a flashlight found at the scene. Whoever had taken their lives had also done other things to them, which I can't bring myself to talk about in this video. I'm sure you can imagine what. none of their parents could have predicted what would happen to their daughters when they dropped them off for what was supposed to be a fun-filled break. The camp was of course immediately evacuated, and sniffer dogs were brought in to track down evidence. Here's what was found. A footprint belonging to a man who wore a size 9.5 was imprinted in blood found in tent number 8. There was a single, unknown fingerprint found on the lens of the flashlight which was used to hit the victims. A local in the area also reported hearing, quote-unquote, quite a bit of traffic on a small remote road between the camp and his property between 2:30 and 3 a.m. That appears to be the time that the murders took place. Detectives started scouring Oklahoma for suspects and set their sights on a man called Gene Leroy Hart, a guy with a sordid reputation to say the least. He'd been in and out of jail for a bunch of different offences over the years and was on the run after a successful prison break. His family home was only 1 mile away from Camp Scott, so, needless to say, he knew the area well. He was found hiding out in a Cherokee medicine man's house later that same year and was taken to trial, with the sheriff himself claiming to be 1000% certain he was guilty of taking the scouts' lives. Despite that, things just didn't add up. For instance, Hart didn't wear a 9.5 shoe. It also wasn't his fingerprint on the flashlight. He had a solid alibi, and various other pieces of evidence pointed to him not being the perp. DNA evidence at the scene would later be analysed, and the results showed that the odds of Hart being the killer were 1 in 7,700. Accusations started to be made about him being framed. The jury acquitted him. Still, Hart was sent back to the same prison he had escaped from. He still had 305 of a 308-year sentence to finish. He only served 2 of those, however, as he died in 1979 of a heart attack after lifting weights for an hour in the exercise yard. So yeah, if you're not in great shape, make sure to take it easy. If Hart wasn't responsible for the Girl Scout murders though, who was? Well, this all happened over 40 years ago now, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators still don't know if they're looking for one guy or several. As such, the who, what and why are likely to remain unknown for a long time. There's a plethora of theories floating around, but no smoking gun to speak of. I still believe the murders will be solved, said a childhood friend of Laurie's, many years after the incident. I believe somewhere out there, someone knows something. I hope they realise it's time they came forward. As a side note, 2 of the victims' families sued the camp for $5 million, claiming they'd been negligent by ignoring the threatening note in the donut box. By a 9-3 vote, jurors decided in favour of the camp. This next rabbit hole mystery is a notorious case that's gripped New Zealand for the past quarter century, and which continues to divide it. Let's see what we can piece together. June 20th, 1994, 7:09 AM. A call comes in on New Zealand's emergency number 111. The operator who picks up hears a male voice in great distress.
This can help you. No, they're all dead. What's the matter? They're all dead. I came home and they're all dead. Whereabouts are you? Every street. Oh, every street? 65 every street.
The voice belonged to a 22-year-old man called David Bain. Dunedin police quickly arrived at 65 Every Street, a place that was once home to the Bain family. Now, 5 of the 6 members of the household were lying dead in various rooms. The father, Robin, 58. The mother, Margaret, 50. Their daughters, Arawa, 19, and Laniette, 18, and their son, Stephen, just 14. David was the only one left breathing. All his relatives had been shot, and there was evidence of a violent struggle between the unknown perp and Stephen, who had also been partially strangled. Fibres from a green sweater were found under Stephen's fingernails, suggesting he fought back. A chilling message to David, the only survivor, had been left typed up on the family computer. "Sorry, you're the only one who deserved to stay." Question was, who had written it? David said that he had just come home from his morning paper route. He entered the house without turning on the lights and washed his hands to get all the black ink off them. When he entered his bedroom, he found bullets and the trigger lock of his rifle on the floor. He immediately ran around the house to investigate and found his mother in her bedroom, one of his sisters still gurgling, and his father in the lounge, all of them wiped out. At first, the authorities thought that the man of the house, David's father, Robin, might have been the one responsible. He and his wife were estranged, and Robin was living in a caravan in the garden on weekends. They figured that, after being rejected by his family, and after months of pressure, he'd finally snapped and took them out with him. David, perhaps the only one who sympathized with him, was spared. Thing is, an analysis of the scene proved that it would have been difficult for Robin to have taken his own life, and with no known enemies to speak of, all fingers now pointed to the only other suspect. The eldest son, David. It seemed pretty convenient to the investigators that this all happened while David was out on his rounds, was committed with his rifle, and that for unknown reasons, the perp had left him an exonerating message, having spared his life alone. They suspected that David had taken out his mother, brother, and 2 sisters just before he went off on his morning paper run. Then, after arriving home, waited 25 minutes for his father to come inside from the caravan, at which point he executed him. He then typed up a fake message on the computer to make it seem as if his father was the one responsible. He'd probably annihilated his family to get his hands on a large inheritance. That theory also accounted for the green fibers under Stephen's fingernails. David had been wearing a green sweater that morning, which he'd thrown into the washing machine after returning home from his paper route. It also accounted for the 25 minutes between David arriving home and his call to 911. David was charged with 5 counts of homicide. After a 3-week-long trial that ended up being the most expensive in New Zealand's history, David was found guilty and sentenced to life behind bars. This is where things take an interesting turn. Joe Karam, former rugby player for the All Blacks and a distant relative of David's, took a special interest in the case and believed that something was off about the verdict. After doing some investigation work himself, he came to the conclusion that David Bain was actually innocent. He even went as far as to write 4 books on the subject, visited David 200 times in prison, and used his high-profile status to highlight the issue in the media. This all resulted in a retrial in 2009, and, on the basis of evidence that was discovered after his first trial, it was determined that David had been an innocent man all along. He'd just served 13 long years in jail for a crime he hadn't committed. He was awarded no compensation, but was given a grant of over 900,000 New Zealand dollars to cover his legal expenses. That's a bit less than 600,000 US dollars. After his release, David found it difficult to get work, though eventually he did find love. He married in 2012 and changed his name to William Davies, taking his new wife's surname. Still, the question remains. If David wasn't responsible for the murder of his 5 family members, who was? It had to have been his father Robin, right? Well, this is one rabbit hole that every New Zealander has gone down, and the nation's left divided. Though many believe that David really is innocent, there are just as many people who are sure he actually did slay his family. They bring up valid points. For instance, why was none of Robin's blood on the gun that he supposedly took his own life with? The one that was pressed right up against his head. Robin's fingerprints were found on the barrel of the rifle, though this could have been from him trying to push it out of his face while someone else pointed it at him. David also stated that he found his sister gargling, though as experts point out, this is something that people do after immediately passing away, as in after just being killed. Not to mention, David's only excuse for waiting 25 minutes to call for help was that he was in shock, though many people just don't buy that, and believe that he was either waiting for his father to come inside to kill him, or was using that time to cover his tracks. Then again, only last year, new witnesses came forward who claimed to have seen David stumbling around outside in a dazed-like state shortly after returning from his paper route, which would support David's telling of events. There's a whole bunch of other pieces of evidence and information that will lead you down the same deep rabbit hole as the people of New Zealand, and each new tidbit might just have you swaying from one suspect to the other. There's an amazing 10-part podcast called Black Hands that covers the case in incredible detail. If you're interested in diving deeper, I recommend starting there. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Robin Mickelson for making the thumbnail for this video. If you haven't already checked him out, then make sure to do so by clicking the links down in the description. Also, a huge thank you to all of my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. The Lecky, Expand On, Leonardo Martinez, Hungry and Hammered, Aura Dragon 1, Ricky Cohen Jr., Hamish Kay, Phantom Knight, TheOnlyDorita, Lord 210, Azrael Warakai, Silas Gheist, Alba Medrano, Infamous-senpapi, Sieg, Decaying Girl, Connor Louthan, Kelly Rocco, Nadine, Kelly Rocco again, Sloane Crawford, Sarah Ramirez, Anime Wimp, Gina Valera, Procupidine Natter, Philip Westra, Alex Greensall, Tom King, Monica Mendoza, and Crawford K. McDonald. Thank you guys so much for your continued support, it really helps the channel out. Follow me on my social media channels and my new Discord, and you'll be hearing from me again very, very soon. Until then guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.